Greg, thanks so much for joining me today. Super excited to chat with you. And Greg, you are the founder and CEO of Overclock Labs, which is the creator of the Akash network. And the Akash network is a decentralized peer-to-peer marketplace for cloud compute. It's often referred to as the Airbnb for data centers. All right, so we have a ton to go into. I'm a total newbie within this world of kind of decentralized compute. But I guess can you take me to kind of even before decentralized compute, even before Akash network, how does the cloud work today? How do data centers work today? How does all of that? Because what I want to get at is why is Akash better? But like, tell me like the lay of the land before the decentralized network that you're building.
Of course, thank you so much for having me here. Get an idea like what cloud is, right? So it's all our data, be it this particular podcast being recorded, our emails, our messages, all our data that runs the society resides on a computer somewhere, right? It could be on your computer or it could be on someone else's computer, but essentially whatever computer houses this need to be secure, need to be connected, need to be powerful enough to serve your data. So, we as human beings produce quite a lot of data, right? And all that data need to be stored in a safe manner and processed by a powerful enough computer, right? So now imagine millions of us generating the data that you hire companies to manage it for you because it gets really crazy and gets really, unmanageable at a certain date, right? Now the question is like, you can keep the data in your computer, but is your computer available all the time? Like my laptop is not online all the time. It's with me when I'm traveling. So what happens when I want to get my data when my laptop is offline, right? So really that's the premise of like why we need to store the data in someone else's computer. Now that someone else's computer need to be powerful enough that it can be turned on pretty much 24/7, 365 days, right? And it needs to be secure so that bad actors should not get access to your data. It should be connected to a powerful cable to offer you that data at a reasonable speed when you want it, where you want it, right? So you need all these aspects. In order for you to get that, you can obviously house it in a residential setting, but you rather house it in a data center, which is a gigantic machine that is specially built to store and service your data and process your data. Now, these data centers, there are about 8 million of them across the globe, owned by large companies. Anyone that can essentially has the know-how on how to manage, configure, manage, deploy computers at scale and secure them can own a data center, right? Now, there are situations where, and if you look at how much these data centers are used, it's only 15% of the time. Because say you are someone like Walmart or someone like TurboTax, right? So that Intuit, which owns TurboTax, your usage peaks during season. In case of TurboTax, your usage peaks during tax season, right? So off tax season, your usage is probably like 5%. So you have these massive data centers with underutilized supply, right? So you have the scenario, which is very inefficient way to distribute global compute. On the other hand, you have these, because, you need specialized skill to house your compute and house your data, and you need staff, to monitor the data center 24/7 that's specialized. It gets overwhelmingly expensive to manage a data center. So companies often tend to hire someone, in sense, hire another company to offer these managed services instead of trying to build them themselves, especially if you're a high growth focused company where your specialty is not managing data centers, but rather delivering a product and value to your customers, right? So that the notion of renting a different company to manage your cloud operations is called cloud computing or infrastructure as a service. And there are about four of these companies around the world that have overwhelming amount of market share, of over 80% market share, which is Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, and Alibaba. So what happens when you have uh, that much amount of power in so few is essentially corruption, right? We all love a free market, but when a free market gets oligopolized, it gets corrupted. So the solution historically for corruption has been regulation, but we all know how that goes. If you regulate, I mean, we saw what happened with the railroads, we saw what happened with the entire oil industry, oil and gas industry. We saw what happened with finance, whatnot. Historically, yes, companies tend to get really large and tend to create moats that prevent good competition, stifle innovation, and regulation comes in and slaps that, and that makes it even worse. Like the reason why we don't have sugar, like real cane sugar anymore in US, and that's replaced by corn sugar, is because of dumb regulation. The reason why railroads are not popular anymore. They used to be extremely popular in the United States in the late 1800s, and they died by regulation, right? Not because the technology was bad, not because airlines took over. You still have railroads pretty active in Europe and Asia, but not in US. So regulation usually looks like a good answer, but almost all the time the outcome is just detrimental to the industry it regulates, right? So can we create a free market without corruption? It was a big question we all were asking until we discovered there's this notion that, hey, you can actually have a free monetary system that doesn't need to be regulated, but regulated by math rather than people, right? So what that means is, like I said, there's a lot of underutilized capacity. Now the question is, can we bring that underutilized capacity and offer that capacity in a reasonable way without creating these large companies and large moats? And we were searching and searching, and we ran into Bitcoin, really in 2013, right? Bitcoin was an amazing idea how it can decentralize money. And we thought, hey, how about we decentralize compute? Even before that, we wanted to create this open system where anyone can access a compute that's underutilized in a safe and secure manner. And of course, account for bad actors. We didn't have the how do you account for bad actor capability, but we had the idea that, hey, we can actually create a marketplace. Then crypto came along. And right before crypto, the idea of a super cloud was forming in academia, really. I mean, all of us in industry wanted to create this super cloud, but I think it was Cornell that really wrote a paper describing what a super cloud could be. Very high level, very visionary. Like the academics, they are very, what do you call, I would say not so virtue signaling, but very, very too perfect of a system, right? Then we took that system and we said, well, can we actually make this a reality? Now we have decentralization that's becoming a reality with Bitcoin, and Ethereum really came about in 2015 with Frontier, Ethereum Frontier, which proposed you can do smart contracts. We were fascinated by, hey, you can actually make Bitcoin programmable. And that's when the idea for Akash came about, that, hey, we can take this underutilized capacity and we can create a layer of decentralized control plane on top of that, and by which users can access this capacity without needing a middleman. And that was the most important thing. If you consider cloud as the layer that keeps a modern society together, and that layer needs to be decentralized, and that layer needs to be not controlled by any single individual, but rather the collective that should have a say on how the network should run. And more important, it should be fully open source, right? So that was the premise of Akash. And there are a lot of ideas. There are a lot of problems with open source software if you think about it, right? Like a big challenge is open source software. Even though if you look at open source as the predominant way the internet works today, 97% of the internet runs on open source software, right? Very, very small percentage runs on closed source. So open source is clearly the answer for anything that's meaningfully successful. But the challenge with open source is monetization, business, a business model. Even popular software like Kubernetes and Docker, even though people use them and love them, couldn't figure out how to sustain themselves as a way to keep building the software. So sustainability was a challenge. So we looked at all these aspects, and decentralization was the solution to sustainability, to center points of failure, to closed source and opaqueness, to pricing. Right? I mean, we want to make sure that whatever we pay is the right price and not being manipulated by by actors that have an intentions and they have some incentive to do so. So yeah, so we looked at all this, and decentralized cloud was the answer, and we were the first ones to do it. We wrote a paper, published it in 2018. It got notoriety, got acceptance, and 2020 we were able to launch the network after a series of testnets, and here we are.
That's amazing. Wow. Okay, so you've been working on this since 2013. You said that there was you were kind of noodling on that, and you discovered Bitcoin. That kind of was like, okay, wow, maybe through this technology we can build this out. Is that kind of right? That flow?
First line of code we wrote was in,
Wow, that's crazy.
and we still have that somewhere. I mean, the current code has changed quite a lot from that, but yeah, we started working on it 2013. I was actually So before Akash, created a company called Angel Hack. Angel Hack is the largest hackathon-based accelerator in the world. There were several companies that came out of Angel Hack. The most successful one was Firebase, and it launched at Angel Hack, right? So we had about 200,000 developers across the globe. So seeing people work under duress at a hackathon taught me a lot on how you should design tooling and what matters to people. And overwhelmingly, what mattered was, well, at a hackathon, you can come and deploy something, build something in a short time, deploy that, and make it available for a small set of users. But when you want to scale it up and make it available to a bigger audience, you more often than not have to use something like an Amazon, and you'll start realizing the costs overwhelmingly go high as you keep using Amazon. The notion that, hey, just pay and use for what you pay, even though it sounds great on paper, in actuality is very different. You see horror stories about how costs go up. Even small startups like tend to die because of costs, especially in the AI era, right? There are other challenges. Even getting access to chips is hard in the AI era, but bottom line, the cost of cloud is so high. Andreessen actually wrote a paper in a few years ago that talked about this $1 trillion paradox, where they estimated around 50% of every single penny you pay for a online service goes to a cloud provider. That's cutting into the margins of these startups, right? So it gets overwhelmingly expensive after a certain time to be on a cloud that you don't control. So a lot of these, like, were very obvious for us as operators in Silicon Valley back then, but it became more obvious in the AI era, when you can actually see the chip shortage, when you saw Elon Musk's of the world going on stage and saying getting access to GPUs is harder than getting access to drugs, even though there's a low bar in San Francisco. But just to give you an idea how hard it is, it's been brewing for a long time, and we acted at the right time, and now we have Akash, which is extremely successful and extremely used cloud.
Okay, so here's another amateur question. If these big cloud providers, if their margins are so high and they're absolutely crushing it in that world, why are there not many other startups or competitors launching to try to take over and build their own data centers? I know it's cost intensive, but couldn't you, in theory, raise $200 million or $300 million to go build some data centers on each coast or something like that?
Yeah, it gets overwhelming. The economy has scale play out, right? So yeah, even if you put $200 million, Amazon will put $2 billion on top of it, just overcompute you. So the traditional model of owning your data center and offering that on a margin, making profits, is very, very hard to break into. And there are these companies that build large moats that makes it impossible for you to compete at a reasonable scale. So the only way to compete is to do something they cannot do, right? That's why decentralization comes into play. Like, they cannot go inside a home where networks like Akash can go inside a home. Like, I can go tap into a data center in this particular office that is sitting on a bunch of H100s that are not used, right? Amazon cannot do that, right? So things of that nature, I think you got to beat Amazon at a game that they cannot play. Open source is something that Amazon can't play, and large companies don't really have a good open source or understand open source monetization or understand how to play the open source game, whereas Akash is able to, right? There are niches here and there. You see companies like CoreWeave and whatnot raising enormous amounts of capital in specialized compute, right? So CoreWeave was able to break the moat because they have a deal with NVIDIA, right? Without NVIDIA's blessings, CoreWeave wouldn't be where it is right now. NVIDIA's dominance is, it's dominant for now, but that's not long term, right? I mean, obviously, you're going to see quite a lot of innovations happening the chip space and the energy and all that. It's going to challenge NVIDIA's domination in a very short time. So whether the question is, can you actually create a long-term, like a business that competes with Amazon doing what Amazon does? The answer is, I don't think so. It's going to be very hard.
Right. So, in your opinion, the only way to compete with these hyperscalers is to make a decentralized version of what they're doing to really scale.
Yeah, a decentralized version that innovates differently. Not exactly what they're doing. Sure, it's a certain aspect of replication, but I think the real success is going to be just innovating in its own way, which is Akash is starting to take shape now. And the distribution that you get with like if your open source software is successful, you have massive distribution for open source, right? And there's no doubt about it. If you look at Kubernetes, which is used by 90% of the cloud, which is open source, right? But there's no way to monetize it. But I mean, unless you offer support and services on top of it, but the actual software itself can unlock network effects like nothing, where you can't pay money to unlock those network effects. So yeah, open source has a great shot at winning against a closed source competitor if it's done right. And more often than not, the challenge with open source software is monetization.
Can you describe to me how Akash network works?
So at a simple setting, Akash is a decentralized network. That means there's no single company you go to or single website you go to. There are literally like hundreds of copies everywhere on the internet. So you can find a copy of the blockchain essentially, and you can start the blockchain. You can all the data of Akash you can get at a computer you start, right? Of course, there are easier services that make it easy, so you don't have to download the entire blockchain because that takes forever. So you go to as a provider, as someone that has excess compute, you put their computer on Akash blockchain. Essentially, you say, hey, I have some amount of compute, and I'm ready to accept any bids. And the tenants that want to use a compute describe their job or their application in this language we created called SDL. And basically, they say, hey, this is my image, my Docker container that I want to run. And these are a bunch of Docker containers. I want them to work together. It's called orchestration. And then I am willing to pay X amount of dollars for that match all these parameters or the attributes that I want. So the attributes could be location, could be compliance, it could be a whole lot of attributes that the provider need to match in order to win the bid. And you place this order on the chain, and when the order goes on chain, you essentially creates a work order, and providers that are willing to fulfill the work order bid on this job. So then you create a reverse auction. So what's happening here is the tenant is setting the price that they're willing to pay in order for them to use a provider. Now, provider bids on it, so you're guaranteed to get the best price because ultimately the price is what the tenant and the provider chooses to pay, right? The buyer and the seller, right? So the seller is setting the price here. And once you get a bunch of bids and you review the bids and you select the winner, usually the ones that offer the most cost optimized a bid wins. But sometimes it's not the cost, sometimes it's just quality. Sometimes some cheaper ones may not be the best ones in terms of their uptime, whatnot. There's a lot of parameters that go into you selecting. That's why a human is needed to select the compute. It's not, the system doesn't give you a bunch of compute and expect that you use, right? So you're always guaranteed that you get the highest quality because you're choosing, and there are information available for you to choose from. So, and once you choose a provider, a lease gets created, and the tenant is required to deposit certain tokens into this escrow account. As long as the escrow account is not negative, that is alive. Once the tokens go out of into negative or zero, the lease gets closed. So, and that entire transactions happens in a peer-to-peer. The blockchain literally goes away. Blockchain is only there to coordinate you getting access to the compute and to ensure that you're paying for the compute. So that's sort of the liveliness of the lease is managed on blockchain, but the actual execution of the lease is peer-to-peer. So the tenant and provider talk directly. There's no middleman. That's really how it works. Right now, as of this morning, our utilization for GPUs is about 92%.
Wow.
It's highest of any cloud, decentralized or not.
It's
And that's
amazing.
good problem, bad problem to have. Good is because we proved that there's clear product market fit, there's clear demand, it's clear that as you put more supply, it's going away. But the bad problem is, well, people are expecting to come and find supply. They're not able to find any supply because, well, supply is gone.
All right, so I want to talk about that supply issue shortly, but before that, you mentioned geography and compliance. So, okay, I'm in Chicago. I have, some spare. I used to mine some whatever. So I used to do some ETH mining back in the day when it was proof of work with my GPUs. Now, I'm like, oh, I want to contribute to Akash, but you said that the person who's looking for this compute, maybe their parameters are like, actually, I need to be near Texas, and I need, in terms of compliance, I need like a tier 2 data center or something like that, which obviously I don't have, and I'm in Chicago. You, for example, maybe you have a tier 2, your GPUs are in a tier 2 data center, and maybe you're in Texas. So, would that provider be like, okay, I'm going to choose Greg's machines for this job because they fulfill my needs?
Yeah. So what are the tenant wants? So some tenants are like, yeah, just give me some compute. Doesn't matter. Cheap, wherever, right? Like I'm looking for cost. If you're doing mining, it doesn't really matter. For you, cost per cycle or whatever you're mining for matters more to you than compared to someone that's running a healthcare type of scenario where you want HIPAA, you want SOC, you want all the tier 3. You want to make sure that these compliance is actually checked and verified by auditor and whatnot, right? So really, it's an open market, right? It really comes down to what people want and people can offer. There's no restriction on, there's no minimum requirements. You can have like literally a Raspberry Pi on Akash if you want. But the question is whether it gets selected by a tenant that's looking for Raspberry Pi. Yeah, but if someone's not looking for Raspberry Pi, they're not. So overwhelmingly these days, a lot of the demand is for H100, I mean, is for GPUs, in particularly H100s and A100s. They tend to go very, very quickly. Whereas your cheaper, like 3070s or like T4 or some of the older chips may not be as attractive as the latest and greatest, right? So, but I mean, these days we are seeing quite a lot of T4s, which is older generation chips that are not really used by anybody, used for mining, right? So mining is a great use for like low-end GPUs that are just sitting idle in data centers because people upgraded them, and they're actually you may not even want to sell them because you can optimize for taxes that way, right? So it's quite a lot of like there's quite a lot of like tax optimization and advantage of keeping the GPUs with you.
So when you were getting this network started, it's tough because you need to get both the supply and also actually bring the demand over. So how did you bootstrap that from the early days? Because that must have been really difficult. Because did you just market to people and tell people, hey guys, come on here, and this is how it works or whatever? How did you get those first couple customers?
Yeah, so it was very hard, right? So it was very BD driven, more the marketing driven, right? So it was the first few customers. We kind of had conversations with people before we built, so it was very clear. We validated the customer need before we went and built it. So it was not that it was hard, but it was not that crazy. And we also had a great community. Like I think one of the few things we did right with Akash that I don't know is going to work outside Akash, or maybe it will, is we built a very strong community early, very, very early before product has launched, right? Or maybe it works. Usually works when you have a strong community. And we were able to build strong communities because we had tokens before we launched. So we created games, we made it a lot of fun to teach people how to use Akash because there's a huge behavioral change that was needed. I mean, you're not used to, I mean, most people are used to login, password, emails, whatnot. Here you have a key, you have a wallet, you have, this unusual way you deploy things. It's not fast like you normally expect in a cloud. It's blockchains, it's slow, right? There are all these behavioral aspects people need to learn. So we made it very fun. So we had this like test sort of like application or test net. So we made people use it, and if you use and deploy something, you get some tokens. I mean, not non-monetary assets. Actually, there's a bunch of like fun tokens, right? And these tokens started gaining value later on, so which became a lot of fun. So a lot of people that got two tokens ended up earning hundreds of thousands of dollars or something crazy like that. But remember, we started giving out tokens before they had value, and so people didn't come because tokens had value. People came because it was fun. It's the outcome later went nuts with crypto. So yeah, you can have. I think for us, creating that fun community was amazing because these were the early users, and they told other people, and that's how it was. And the adoption was not that great in the first year. I would say like first couple of years, it was very hard. It was like going up and down and up and down. It's all non-linear, right? It's always the case, but it started skyrocketing since the introduction of GPUs. To our dumb luck, ChatGPT launched. So we had GPUs on the roadmap for a long time. we had testnets for a while, and ChatGPT launched, and that made it obvious, like, hey, AI is exciting. A lot of companies wanted GPUs, and that created an enormous shortage of GPUs last year, if you remember, especially for H100s. So Akash was the only place you can get A100s for a long time. And we focused on demand more than supply because we knew we have enough demand, supply will come, and naturally supply came as on day one we launched GPUs. I think Foundry Digital, which is a DCG company, just put a bunch of H100 or A100s because they bought a bunch of A100s to mine, I think, Filecoin, and Filecoin mining was not profitable any longer at ETH mining, right? So a lot of crypto companies had supply. So we got really lucky in attracting crypto companies to put their GPUs, and they attracted a bunch of AI companies. And now we have a good, healthy equilibrium. I mean, now it's always like a race, right? Supply comes, I mean, demand comes, supply. It's almost like we're like almost out now, like 93%, which supply is going to take a while to recognize, and like, hey, people are seeing that there's enormous amount of compute here. You can just put a compute and just sell. So that takes a little while to propagate the message. So it's just a nice equilibrium. It goes up and down in terms of like supply and demand. Sometimes we'll have more supply than demand. Sometimes we'll have a lot more demand than supply can satisfy.
These providers, these people that have the GPUs, what is their, I mean, you mentioned like Foundry and whatnot. And so what is the general profile? Is it like, home GPU miner that used to be mining ETH and then now are like contributing to Akash? Or is it like the Foundries of the world, or even like, I don't know, even larger players that have tons and tons of GPUs in actual data centers? Are those the ones providing the compute to Akash, or like what does that look like?
Yeah, most computers are data centers. I don't think we have any home. There may be home or semi-professional like compute out there. It's hard to say because again, it's Akash. Like, I mean, most of the semi-professional ones are not audited. They just there earning something, and they're utilized too. So it's hard to say exactly. But I know the big ones for sure, and Foundry is one, right? So we have Oblivious, we have you know Valdi, we have a lot of like smaller cloud providers that took advantage. So what happened last year was this enormous GPU shortage attracted entrepreneurs from all walks of life. And a lot of people looked at this incredible opportunity. It's a new gold rush, right? And there's a lot of financing available last year. If you look at, the interest rates were high. It's very profitable to lend out money as a bank for like 11 to 18% interest. So there's a lot of financing available. A lot of these guys ended up buying up all the hardware, but the challenge with compute is, um, no matter how much of compute you have, you still need energy to power the compute. So it's easy. Well, it's not that hard to get a 10 megawatt capacity data center, but anything about 10 is very, very hard. Like, forget 50 megawatt capacity. In fact, there is a 50 megawatt capacity in Memphis, owned by X or Tesla. I can't remember. I think it's X owned. They're literally burning like diesel. They have like on-site diesel generation because they can get power to power a 50 megawatt. So there are a lot of these small players that could get. So for context, each H100 consumes about 1.2 kilowatt of energy, about 800 for the chip and about 400 for the cooling, right? So like a megawatt, 10,000 kilowatt, which is 10,000 kilowatt is a megawatt, right? Yeah, a megawatt is 1,000 kilowatts.
15,000 kilowatt is 15 megawatt.
Apologies, didn't sleep. Yeah, so 15 megawatt or like 10 megawatt data center could house up to like 4 to 8,000 chips, right?
Wow.
So you could find a lot of the data centers with like 4 to 8,000 H100 profile, and there are a lot of these guys because the moment the data centers are out, and now so there are a lot of the small guys, but not large setups. So a lot of them are putting their supply in Akash. So there's like secondary marketplaces now popping up everywhere. Akash is the first one. So Akash. So when you have such like saturated market where you have extremely fragmented distribution of supply, you need a federator like Akash to come and tell you where the chips are, right? So that's now our transition, and we are seeing like older. There are also like companies that buy OpenAI chips from OpenAI and put them on Akash. So there's a company called Kato, I think, that's putting They're like secondary used V100s, I believe, which is what GPT-2 was trained on. Those exact chips GPT-2 was trained on are now on Akash now. So we see all these like older chips because people want to upgrade. H100s, however, are primarily from these like, I guess, like these vendors that acquired 4,000 to 8,000 chips, but not from large companies. A100, you get a mix of AI companies and whatnot. The smaller chips is a bunch of miners and like, just secondary, I guess, like acquirers, I suppose, from the large companies. So it's a mix. But right now everything is going, so I can't really tell you which is the most utilized because everything is utilized, right? So and depends on like where we see the demand. Usually when we have like a large model like Llama, when Llama drops, everybody wants like Llama, like H100s, right? Like Llama 3.1. When you have like an image model or a video model, that's the latest and greatest, like Flux, everybody wants like 49. It's a very hard to even like plan your demand side because it's very dependent on the model that's released. So we're keeping a very broad approach now. So you can't really say specifically like the supply is coming from one aspect because it's supplies from everywhere. Ideally, we want supply to come from a home. Um, we're not there yet. We're getting there with decentralized training and whatnot. But from a fault tolerance standpoint, if you can have a home device, be it your PS2 or sorry, my bad, PS5 or any PlayStations or Xboxes that just sit idle. I mean, I use my Xbox maybe once a year during Christmas usually,
That's really cool.
right?
You
Like,
can use that as the.
yeah, there
It's
was a
very cool.
time, in fact, like, yeah, U.S. Air Force, I believe, uh, U.S. Air Force, I believe, built a supercomputer with PS2 a few years ago, 8 years ago, I think. They had like 1,000, can't remember, I think there's 1,000 plus PS2s. They built a supercomputer, and that was used for AI, and it was perfectly great. But then Sony closed off their, I guess, PS2s to a point where you can no longer hack. But it was a great opportunity if you want Sony to play the AI game now.
That's really cool. So okay, so these small suppliers or small-ish data centers that have these GPUs, why would they provide compute to Akash versus like, let's say, I don't know, one of these crypto native platforms like RunPod, or I know there's one called like Lepton AI. What besides, because from my understanding they're paid in USD, so why would people want to provide compute to Akash versus one of these other traditional
I mean,
guys?
they could. I mean, I think Akash, as long as Akash is delivering the demand, right? So Akash also pays in USDC if you want. There's a fee for it. It's not AKT alone, but I would say go where the demand is. I mean, Akash clearly has more demand. I don't know how, we can't say RunPod's demand because there's nothing, you can't see. It's a closed source, right? With Akash, it's very visible. You can see the demands, you can see where it's coming from. So I would imagine if you are a chip owner, you should be able to put your chips anywhere you want. And Akash has got integrations now, like so you have NVIDIA Brev, which use Akash. It's a fine tuning of the service product from NVIDIA. So Akash has got a lot of amazing sort of like distribution points, like Prime Intellect and Bitmine. I mean, I think there are about like 8 clients now for Akash. They're offering incredible, easy to use onboarding for non crypto folks that that drive quite a lot of demand. So as a supplier, you want to look at places which drives the demand. There's no exclusivity, right? You can provide Akash at the same time provide RunPod. Like I think you should be able to, right? Like I don't see why not. I think we want more efficient usage of resources. So whatever that means, meaning supplying to multiple sources. Ultimately, it's the demand side that's going to determine like the supplier. So that's why we are heavily focused on demand in terms of distribution, in terms of ease of use and whatnot.
Yeah, these customers that are coming on board, are they like requiring, hey, like we need the highest specs, we need like the most intensely built out data center of all time, we need H100s, whatever, like top of the line GPUs, or like what is the typical profile of the customer? Are they like, no, we're okay with kind of middle of the road GPUs, and it doesn't need to be some intense data center, it could be kind of a smaller facility, it's not tier one or whatever. What does that look like?
Well, from the ones we know, we don't know all. I mean, right now everything's used, right? So it doesn't matter if you're a tier 2 or like a home computer or a tier 4. Everything is just getting used. So I can't tell you like this particular GPU is getting used or that. But from what we've seen, the most used ones are tend to be the H100s and A100s. H100s being the most, not the most advanced, but at least the most widely used chips from NVIDIA. And clearly because they have 80 gigs of memory, and they're very very fast, and they can host Llama. So we had a huge demand for Llama. I think that drove the H100s. So typical profile is, and we have a lot of demand for 4090s. So 4090s are like 24 megabyte or gigabyte boxes. They're clearly not H100 capable, but they're really good for diffusion models, right? So it's text models, diffusion models. Diffusion models are good for non-text like image, voice, whatnot. So the demand is everywhere for us. So we're not specific. And the interestingly, the non high density chips or high end chips like T4s or V100s, so some of the older chips are used by miners, right? So it's like it's not, completely out, because if they're cheap enough, they have a use. It comes down to how expensive and cheap they are, right? It's not AI alone that's driving the needs. There's a lot of image generations, a lot of like non-AI GPU usage at a right price can drive a demand as well. So it's hard to say. Like with Prime Intellect, I suppose recently with they figured out how to do distributed training or commodity hardware. News Research, which is doing they figured out how to do distributed training on heterogeneous hardware, which was not possible until about 2 months ago, right? So what that means is so traditionally, in order for a chip to participate in a training run, it has to be homogeneous, right? So if you use H100s, you have to use H100s. And they had to be co-located, connected with hyper fast like interconnectivity, and that's why large LLM training was predominantly on like large clusters, like XAI is building 100,000 or built recently 100,000, you know, in 18 days or something, right? They configured a 100,000 H100 cluster, which is massive, right? You needed the cluster because there's a lot of message passing that happens between these neural networks, right? But that has been solved by this company called News Research and Prime Intellect, where any heterogeneous device, be it 4090, be it H100, be it A100, doesn't really matter, can participate in a training run over the internet, not co-located. So that changes the game completely, right? So the first billion parameter model is being trained now on News. News, by the way, uses Akash. First 10 billion parameters is being trained by Prime Intellect, all using Akash, by the way. So there's quite a lot of like demand for commodity hardware that they gain because of this. The landscape is changing so rapidly. You can't specifically say, oh, this particular chip is going, because the moment I say, yeah, H100 is in demand, we see 4090 is going up. So it's really hard to pinpoint. I think we're too early to say. But yeah, naturally, the latest and the greatest chips is going to have the highest demand, like anything.
Totally. So with Prime Intellect, my understanding of them is that they're like an aggregator, and they just make it. They're like an interface where people can easily access Akash and other decentralized compute networks. Is that right?
Yeah, but they also have a training that's separate from the Prime Intellect core product. They have a model called Intellect One that they introduced about a month ago, I think, where they're training a 10 billion parameter model based on this paper Google DeepMind wrote called Dialoco, and they created the software version, the implementation of Dialoco called Open Dialoco, which I think Dialoco means with distributed local compute, I believe. This essentially works on localizing cluster, having like small clusters contribute to a larger training run. I think they're now 60% complete or 50% complete. I can't remember, but it should be complete in the next couple of weeks or a few weeks. That'd be the first ever 10 billion parameter model trained over the internet, which people 10 billion is bigger than GPT-2, smaller than GPT-3. So it's like between GPT-2 and GPT-3, fully decentralized, which is incredible. I mean, or distributed. So next model is a 100 billion parameter model, and after that we're going to see a trillion parameter model. A trillion, and GPT-4 is like 1.2 trillion. It is believed to be 1.2 trillion.
Wow.
Right? So I don't see a reason. I mean, with enough capital and with enough incentives, I don't see a reason why you know uh, training over the internet can be a profitable venture. They're like the companies like Pluralis, can't say the name properly. There's a new company that's figured out how to do monetization. I think there's another company called Sentient AGI, which also is working on monetizing open source models. That's a big gap because, yeah, you can build this open source model with all your benevolence, but ultimately, if it's not making money,
Right.
what's the incentive, right? So figuring out incentives is extremely important. In order for a open source model to have incentives, you cannot have open weights, but you still want open source because open source is better from terms of
Mm-hmm.
correctness and whatnot. So can we create a mechanism where the contributor of the compute becomes a partial owner of the model that they train, and so that way you get inference revenue. So inference is how you make money, and training is how you spend money, I suppose, right? So if there's a good way for inference to work at performance while giving royalties and or share the profits to the owners or contributors, that's a winner in my
Yeah.
case. Like especially with crypto now, we're entering this incredible bull phase, and God only knows what. I mean, I predict mid 2025 is when the decentralized AI is going to shine because we have a lot of companies like Jensen that figure out how to do verifiable machine learning with verifiability. Prime Intellect, News Research, Paralis, Exolabs, all these amazing companies are made incredible progress in their own fields that contribute to the larger decentralized AI narrative. I think that's going to explode, and I think Akash being the foundation layer for this new era is going to be an incredible opportunity for Akash to really shine.
That's awesome. Okay, so and also I saw in a podcast I was listening to before, it was with a group called Coinage, and you mentioned that NVIDIA is a customer.
Yes.
Could you tell me more about that? I was really surprised because I thought it was, I don't know, I just figured it was more smaller data centers that were providing computing, kind of interacting with you guys. I didn't know it was like NVIDIA that was actually doing that as well.
So there's a company called Brev.dev, which is like a fine tuning as a service. They integrated Akash sometime back. Actually, it goes back even longer. Like it's a company called Agora, I guess. Like it's an Austin-based company. They were one of the bunch of students from Columbia and UT. They were looking for compute. They couldn't find compute on Amazon. They found Akash. There's a story on Semaphore about this. Actually, it's kind of cool. They found Akash, and they obviously could get A100s. I'm super happy, and they decided because Akash was hard to use because of crypto. Yeah, and these students could figure out they wanted to build something for students to easily get and fine tune and really boot up like a Google notebook, which is like PyTorch, easily on H100 because PyTorch was very limiting to like smaller GPUs and not advanced. And a company in San Francisco called Brev acquired them because they wanted to integrate with Akash, and they ended up integrating with Akash through the acquisition. And NVIDIA really liked Brev, what they did, and acquired Brev. So we got grandfathered into NVIDIA. And it's interesting because NVIDIA, people don't talk about how challenging it is to work with larger companies with crypto, because I think, when you have to go to someone like NVIDIA and be like, hey, you have to go buy tokens from Coinbase in order to use Akash, that is a hoop that people have to jump to the finance department. It's just extremely hard to have convinced, especially the largest company in the world, to convince them that they don't care about crypto. They just want to use the product. So we had to work around mechanisms where they can get access to crypto without going through all the necessary, KYCs of the world, of whatever you need to do. Still, but in a way that's legal, right? So it's very, very challenging. I mean, crypto is like literally we're walking with our hands tied to sell to big enterprises because it's not like, hey, net 30, here you go, send you invoice. Even though now that's what we're doing with Nvidia now. It's just like they buy tokens and we invoice them, but it's very challenging to sell to enterprises. I think we figured out quite a lot on how to do that. So we have mechanisms where we don't give access to crypto, but you can still use the crypto from our wallets, uh, us delegating you the crypto in a way for you to deploy. So we had to work around new features that allow us to sell to enterprises now, which was a huge learning. But yes, but we that's how we got grandfathered into the deal.
That's really cool. Yeah. So going forward, how do you plan on making the Akash network? Because you're talking about these students, they had the issue, and then NVIDIA's with the tokens. Like they're like, I don't know, I don't understand this. How do you plan on making Akash just very username password, very simple, very Web two, just like easy?
Yeah, so we have that now. Hence the recent jump in our utilization. We introduced credit cards without losing self custody, and that's the important part. So we have a mechanism. We'll probably write a blog post about it. It's actually fascinating. We have a mechanism now where you can just purchase tokens, but you don't get access to the tokens physically because that you need MSB license for that. But you can still get to use those tokens to deploy. And deploying, you don't need KYC, right? So, I mean, simplest answer to the question is like, oh, just I'll sell you the tokens, but you cannot legally sell tokens. Like, it's highly regulated because tokens are considered money. You can't sell money legally in the United States, in most Western countries, I think. So if there's a way to not sell the tokens but sell compute in terms of credits by using a credit card, so people love it. I mean, our activation rate went from 0.5% to 75% after infusing
Whoa,
credit cards.
that's insane. That is actually insane.
Yeah, it's nuts. Now we have to put more. We need more data. We need to go scale up and really see activation at scale. But at our stage, which is fairly good, I mean, 75% was a huge boon. Now we're scaling up supply and growth. But yeah, so yeah, it is now easy to use. But I think Akash has self custody. I mean, a primary way, but there's also like a managed custody where you have a username password and it's optional. We don't recommend it, but if you want to use it, that's the way you want to use it.
How do you deal with the privacy, the data privacy? Because I know that there's, I don't know, a lot of people are hesitant to use decentralized, training or inference or whatever, just because they're worried about their data getting leaked in some fashion. How do you guys handle that?
So, Akash gives you the same privacy guarantees Amazon gives you, right? So it really comes down to the provider that you're choosing. Of course, every provider is different. Some providers like Foundry, so the larger providers, Equinix is a part of Akash, right? But there's decentralized set of auditors that audit these providers and paste their, or post their results in a manner that you can verify them. So if you're someone that's concerned about privacy, you should be choosing an audited provider that is not going to that you have indemnity guarantees of some degree, right? But if you don't care, if you're just mining some workloads, well, if you're training, you don't really care about privacy as much. I mean, if that's the kind of workload you have, you can use any provider. Akash is a marketplace; it doesn't give you all the privacy guarantees. It really depends on who you choose. That's why Akash does not make the choice for you. You choose by design, because if Akash is making the choice for you in terms of who compute is providing, who the compute provider is, then you have to go hoops, right? Like, how do you know to trust or whatnot? Here, you know exactly who you're using, right? So that offsets the privacy risks, and a lot of people love that model. Other mechanisms like TEE, which is trusted execution environment, where you have highly private code that you want to run, you can run that ankle. And TEE is self-custodial. That means only the people that have the key can see what's going on. But again, that's a trade-off, right? It's super slow when you're running everything encrypted. So it really comes down to like what trade-offs you can make. If you want super secure, super private, it's going to be a slow application. That's even in the cloud, right? So Akash gives you the option, but you ultimately have to choose how you want to deploy your workloads. I mean, you'll have the same concern about cloud. We're fine in the cloud.
Totally. All right. So I want to talk more on the crypto side. Why did you decide to build on Cosmos?
So Akash is very old, right? I mean, we've been around for a long time. We originally began on Ethereum in 2015, the original 2016 really, but 2015 I would say we got introduced to Ethereum, and we had a we had a bunch, we had a dApp on Ethereum, and the CryptoKitties launched, and they took down our entire infrastructure, and we were like, we can't have something that unscalable.
It's kind of funny that like these pictures of cats took down this like decentralized compute network that you're building. It's like such a
CryptoKitties, kitties
Yeah.
to decentralized compute. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's not going to work out, right?
Yeah.
We started going down the path of building our own L1, and we were like, well, it's very challenging to build your L1. We are a cloud business. We're not cryptographers. We are distributed systems. We're engineers. We're not scientists. You needed scientists to build L1 back then, at least. So we are looking for solutions, and somebody introduced us to Cosmos. I mean, called Tendermint back then. This was 2018, right? And we are written in Go, and Tendermint was Go, and a lot of things aligned. And it seemed very good. It seemed to be working really well. And we were like, well, we're just going to do a POC, and it worked out. Cosmos was built from Tendermint, and we developed our own like branch. So we were like divergent for a long time. And there's a lot of activity happening in Cosmos. We are, if you're talking to any experienced folks in that did software, our goal was to write least amount of code, not write maximum code. Less code, the better, generally speaking, right? So especially shared code like consensus, because you're not reinventing consensus, you're not reinventing staking, you're not reinventing any of these like crypto primitives that are that other people are who are better at it should be able to work on it, not us. We're good at cloud. That's our specialization. So in choosing Cosmos, we saw that it's a platform that's very versatile. It's aligned with what we want with the Golang community. A lot of engineers seem to be working on it. Seem to be our like experience, profile. The software is coming along very good and work really well. It never goes down. Well, the trade-off is, well, you need to secure the chain yourself. That means you need a security budget. That didn't seem all that bad. And now looking back, that was one of the best decisions we made, because no matter what chain you choose, be it Solana, Ethereum, and I guess not many other options, they always go down, right? There's always congestion. There's always something. So if you want to build a truly public utility that's highly reliable, I think app chains are the way to go. Of course, the trade-off is like you don't get liquidity access that you would normally get with Solana or Ethereum. You don't get the shared ecosystem that breadth of ecosystem that the other ecosystems have compared to Cosmos. You don't get all of that. So it really comes down to who you're serving. If your customer base is crypto, Cosmos is probably not the best one. But if your customer base is non-crypto that don't care about crypto, Cosmos is probably the best one because it always works.
Totally. No, that makes total sense. So yeah, could you tell me about the kind of the token economy? The AKT token, staking, and validators.
Yeah, so AKT token is fairly liquid. I think today it's got pretty good volume. I think today we did $150 million volume. Fully diluted value, a little over $1 billion, and market cap about 800 million. So it's a very, liquid, it's a very functioning token. The core purpose of AKT token is to secure the Akash network. Akash network is a proof of stake consensus, that uses proof of stake consensus. And without AKT, there is no proof of stake, right? So without AKT, there is no Akash blockchain. So AKT is very essential, and AKT is the primary way to pay for compute on Akash. But the downside is AKT is volatile, so it's good for paying for short-running jobs, not good for long-running, because the value of AKT might fluctuate depending on while the job is active. So to offset that, we have multi-currency payment mechanisms, so you can pay using any of the whitelisted currencies. USDC is a popular one. In fact, USDC is rising so fast, outpacing Akash usage. But there's a take fee when using USDC, because the economic value of the Akash network is directly proportional to the security of the Akash network. If the value that Akash secures is less than the economic value, that's susceptible to attacks. Right? In order for Akash to be safe, it has to match the economic value that happens on chain. So that's why you want the AKT token to accrue value over time, not the other way around. So value accrual is a property, and it is a function of the network, for which there's take income, there's burning, there's all kinds of things that happen in order to accrue AKT value on the network. But it's usually proportional to the economic value that happens in the network, right? So there is, in order to secure, you have staking. So you stake. You essentially each token has a vote. Obviously, you can't vote all the time, all the token holders. So in order to delegate your vote, you have to stake your tokens to a delegator. There are about 100 validators. Anyone can be a validator. Only requirement to be a validator in the active set is you got to have more tokens delegated to you than the last active set validator, which I can't remember right now, but I think like 400,000. Last check was 400,000 AKT. So as long as you have more than 400,000 AKT, you can delegate it to you, not owned by you. Delegate it to you. You can validate. Permissionless, and the validators essentially becomes also the ones that vote on governance. There are about 280 proposals on chain that on Akash. Very active governance system. There's a public goods fund called Community Fund that funds all activities of Akash, be it incentive design experiments, be it development of Akash network. Say an idea you want to get funded to work on Akash, you can get funded. There's an open committee committees now. About 500 contributors contribute to Akash. There are special interest groups, there are working groups, there are steering committees. It's a very functioning open system. All the meetings are public for Akash. So in case come to a meeting, you miss the meetings, those meetings are uploaded on Arweave and they're transcribed using AI. So you can actually, and now there's an LLM that's being trained. So you can know what exactly happened to a request you made or what feature you want to work on, what happened, if there's any historical context to the feature. It's a very functioning, thriving open ecosystem, all based on AKT token. AKT token is a center piece for this thriving economy.
That's amazing. And also, I love that you're implementing the LLM for like the governance meetings, because when you try to dig into like, oh man, I haven't checked in a month, like what's going on with this this protocol, and trying to understand the governance and whatnot. It's like you're totally you're like, this is too much. I don't know what's going on. So no, that's super.
AI is a great game changer. It can be like, hey, I'm looking at this capability. I can just go and like, hey, give me a background of this like feature.
Yeah,
can give you in the way that you want is phenomenal.
Totally. So what are some major concerns or, I don't know, risks that you think about, and what are you doing to kind of decrease those concerns?
A big risk was regulatory risk. We obviously did a lot of work to offset that risk now. I was very active. I mean, I testified at the California Senate in 2019. I was very active in like the regulatory landscape, both legislative as regulatory. We did quite a lot of work in the joint effort, like crypto industry, to really decouple Akash and DePINs from the rest of the DeFi's and the NFTs of the world. Right? We are a public utility. It should be regulated like a public utility, not like a finance company, right? So I think there's just like the decoupling effort that's actually starting to show results now. Most legislators I've talked to, like some of the top legislators, be it like financial committee or be it like the trade committee or trade and commerce committee. This is a bipartisan, one of the most powerful committees there is, and they recognize Akash. They know Akash really well. I mean, they were like so excited about like Akash and DePIN in general, that hey, this is crypto is delivering to real industries that have been very hard to break into, have been very oligopolized and whatnot. So big challenge is regulatory risk. If you're not allowed to build, we can't do, all of us. I mean, at least the core team, most of us in Akash is U.S. citizens, right? So and really we have no other option. We can't like fly off to like China or somewhere. I guess you can, but I don't want to go there. And second big risk, I think, is I think the quantum risk is like kind of crazy in terms of like what
literally quantum computing.
Quantum risk, right? Like that could break the security.
Really? Okay, so you think quantum computing is like coming soon?
Oh, it's coming soon. We are working with my professors to quantum proof Akash.
No way.
In general,
but quantum has been coming soon for like 40 years.
It's very, very close now. I mean, I would say like next 3 years.
People have been saying that about VR too, and also fusion and whatnot. It's like we're so close,
AI was always 10 years away, but look,
that's true. That's valid.
So I think AI is going to out accelerate a lot of the thing is going to accelerate a lot of these like deep research. There's students in Canada, I think Waterloo students, that could create like nuclear reactors in their dorm rooms.
Yeah.
That's what AI does, right? AI literally like unlocks so much human potential that was locked away because of information asymmetry. So I think like a lot of the fields that we thought historically were far away are going to be proven wrong, right? Like you're going to see fusion in the next 5 years. I think humanity is going to reach type 1 civilization 50 years with the rate we're going, right? So a big risk from a systemic risk, I would think, is like the regulatory risk. You have the quantum, the technology risk in general, right? And I think from a geopolitical standpoint, we don't know what, like Taiwan made it illegal now to export any chips that is over two generations.
Yeah.
Right? Like so, the 2 nanometer chip is not coming to the US anytime. So there is this just geopolitical risk, like what will happen if you I mean, I guess that kind of works out better for Akash because now you can't get new chips, so you had to go back, right? What other risk? I think, yeah, I mean, I think regulatory risk was the biggest risk because we are builders. We can build our way out of any technical hurdle, right? We have such confidence. I was not very like I was not. Yeah, competition is great. I mean, great usually ends up really good for the companies that compete with each other if you have the right ethos and if you don't get crony capitalistic. But regulatory risk has been huge. I mean, we saw like a lot of that. I don't want to name names, but as you spend time on the Capitol Hill, you realize the forces that want to keep AI closed source are acting very, working very hard to keep AI closed source, and they have incentive to do so. But seem to be winning. I mean, legislators are not seem to have consensus that they're not going to legislate unless there's concrete damage done by AI. Like if you want to ban like generative AI that creates fake news, like well, drawing by hand is not banned. Like why should AI be banned? Like so, this fundamental like free speech that's challenged and all that. So I think I think regulatory risk is pretty okay now. It's not that risky. I mean, with the current incoming administration taking a very pro like crypto stance is just gonna be great for us like overall. Right? Yeah, I'm not. If you wake me up like maybe 6 months ago, I would be like a lot more like, oh, regulations like not good. But even with the Democrats winning, I think the tides are shifting from on a Capitol Hill to be more pro crypto. Like I was very impressed with Fit 21 how it passed with 79 Democrats voting for it. I mean, Republicans were primarily pro crypto for a long time, but seeing Democrats that overwhelming majority of Democrats voting for the bill kept me very hopeful, right? So yeah, that's what I think about.
Yeah, it was really cool to see the. I think I don't know who's behind it, but Stand with Crypto. Stand with Crypto. They have a website that I was checking out, but it shows like which politicians are pro and anti crypto. And what I love is the stance is, hey, we don't care if you're a Republican, we don't care if you're a Democrat, you just be pro crypto, and then we'll send you money to support your campaign. And I forget the stats, you might know better, but it was some outrageous election. The people that were pro crypto, it's like they got voted in, I don't know, 85% of the time or something crazy. So that to me is super, super exciting. And
Very, very clear that crypto landed. It is mainstream. It's not going anywhere. That it's a big deal for all of us that have been in the space for a long time. Like I've been full time for 8 years, and crypto was, I couldn't get my bank accounts open if I had crypto, right? So it was crazy to see how far we've come along.
totally. All right. What are some future products or features that you're really excited to add over the coming, I don't know, few weeks, few months, few years?
So our features primarily, I mean, there are two categories. So one is just making it extremely great to use Akash and making it extremely easy to use Akash, and capabilities broad, how far we can go, right? From making it easy, we have a few products that are coming online. Of course, credit card and all that was great. Just these are marginal changes, but very important changes, right? They measurably increase our activation rates. But now, question is, what happens when you have like large models like Metalama 3.1 or Llama 3.2? When you have to like deploy these models, it takes like 5 6 6 hours. Can we reduce that to 30 seconds instead of 5 to 6 hours, right? So we're working on mechanisms on new product that'll be able to like serve these models much quickly, much more scalably, and then makes them significantly more attractive to the Akash and capabilities wise, right? So a lot of times when you deploy something, Akash is all self-service. You had to manage the databases yourself, the caches yourself, everything yourself. But what if there's a mechanism where you can have managed services all orchestrated together in a decentralized manner? There are a lot of services out there that are not widely used because the orchestration piece is missing, right? Across the board, not just a Akash service. I'm talking about like all different decentralized services, right? So can we create a marketplace like Amazon Marketplace, but better, that's owned by the people, run by the people, not individual companies, not just one company, right? So we have open source creators that need business models that can't, sustain themselves because they're not necessarily good business people. They're open source creators. How can we empower these creators to create more open source software and let Akash provide them the avenue for monetizing the software, right? So I think if we do that, if we unlock builders, that unlocks network effects like other, because a lot of these builders have a lot of influence. They're not just, they're open source developers. They have a say in how the future of software is driven, right? So empowering them, I think, is going to be great for us and overall community in general.
So I've been reading. I read an article on Financial Times yesterday, and it was talking about there is a guy in Chicago. He's a trader. He runs a firm called DRW, and he was talking about trading tokenized GPU compute. What are your like? Is that going to happen soon, or is that kind of is that like
I mean, we had a lot from Wall Street. Wall Street is going nuts, my gosh. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's time to commoditize compute. Compute has been very hard to commoditize because of the various dimensionality we have. There's a lot of factors that go into picture, but there are people, not DRW alone. I mean, DRW is one company, but there is a whole new market for commoditizing, especially H100s, right? Like you should be able to trade compute cycles. Like you should be able to create futures. Now we are seeing the problem in Akash, right? So with more utilization, customer complaining that, hi, how can I rely on Akash? Like, how can you be a reliable supplier for my compute? Like people are happy we're getting used because it's good for the ecosystem and it's good for like our, the entity. But people are unhappy because they don't have guarantees anymore that Akash would be a solution to their problems. The first place they came to Akash is because they can't access to computer. So the possibility will be introducing futures, right? So you can purchase future compute, and if you want to use them, use them. If not, sell them off to people that want to use them, right? There are a lot of these amazing things we can do when you have an open market for compute, and Wall Street is looking at a very attractive mechanism on Akash. So I think, yeah, there's certain. I would say like a year, we're going to have compute market futures very easily.
wow?
Share compute. There are people that are like raising capital. You can go purchase now on Akash, a company that'll buy the box for you, rack and stack it for you, maintain for you on rev share, put that on Akash. So that's technically buying compute as a passive investor, which by the way has 1 year amortization, which is amazing. Imagine like buying a home which gives you 1 year amortization, and that's just keeping making profits after that. So all kinds of like I cannot recommend to people that company because that'll be considered financial advice. But a lot of these like companies that are forming on top of Akash are looking at Akash as a way to earn demand, but and financing the supply is super easy.
It's very cool. All right, so last question before the closing questions. What does success look like for you and the Akash network? Like, is it let's looking out some years, 5-10 years?
So for us, our first big milestone is 1% market share. We call it like when are we going to? We look at success not in terms of revenue, in terms of market share, right? We're not there yet. We're a long way from 1% market share. Our 1% market share is when I'm going to celebrate that we are successful, right? And we are growing very fast now. We are growing 1,700% year over year growth, right? I think this month alone we grew by 100% from last month in terms of our earnings. So we are growing I want to keep up the whole order of magnitude growth. If you do that for one order of magnitude growth for about, I think 5 years, we'll reach 1% market share. But maintaining an order of magnitude growth is going to be a little challenging.
Amazing. Wow. All right. Closing question time. So these are short and sweet. All right. What do you think the price of Bitcoin will be a year from now?
$200,000.
I love it. All right. Book, movie, podcast, TV, some sort of content that had an impact on you. What was it?
The best podcast for me for now, I would say, is like Dwarkesh podcast.
Yeah.
That I listen to
So
quite a lot. It had such an impact on me because every guest he has on the podcast, I end up reading their books. Like the last book I read,
cool.
David Reich, where we came from, and who we are and where we came from. It's about genetic anthropological history about humans and how we evolved. It's fascinating because like I didn't realize how close Indians and I guess Mongolian, like Chinese and and Europeans were in terms of genetic closeness. It's fascinating how much I learned that there's 30% genome that's Caucasian in me because of this like crazy like split that happened with the M9. I learned a lot. So I think like the most impactful podcast in the recent times for me was Dwarkesh's podcast.
Awesome. All right. So you cannot work in anything that you're doing now. No Web3, no compute, no cloud, whatever. You have to be doing something totally different. What would it be?
Photography.
Oh, I love that. Amazing. All right. What is one lesson you wish you knew when starting your entrepreneurial journey?
Retention is more important than distribution, which is more important than acquisition.
Oh, I love that. Greg, man, thank you so much. This has been amazing. Thank you. If people want to find out more about yourself and Akash Network, where should they go?
Akash.network is the website. You can get quite a lot of information. Greg Osuri is my Twitter. I'm very active and usually respond very quickly.
Amazing. Sir, thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Andrew. This is fun.
See ya.